please keep mute your mic unless it has been asked or if it's essential to speak. This event will be recorded for quality purposes. So if anybody has anything with the recording, please feel free to share with us. Today, the event will be recorded. And apart from this, at the end of the session, you will be asked for a survey. Always send the survey email to everyone in order to ensure that we are presenting the quality stuff to the members and even to the non-members. Regardless of asking where this will be, a certificate will be issued to the attendees. Yes, we obviously issuing the certificate to all members and non-members, but you need to be at the session minimum 40 minutes because we don't want that someone pop in and then pop out and asking for certificate. So take this word from the chair that yes, certificate will be issued to everyone. Today's event is how to inspire frontline workers to take the responsibility for health and safety. And I think it's an amazing event brought to us by Mr. Patrick Nelson, who is the CEO of Loyalty Point Leadership. So before taking your time and talking much in a general, I would like to call upon, invite Mr. Patrick Nelson to start his presentation and give us some fruitful information about the subject. Thank you very much, Patrick, and the floor is yours.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Syed. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to everyone, wherever you are in the world right now. I'm coming to you live from Minnesota in the United States of America. And for those that may not know, Minnesota is directly south of Canada. So we kind of joke and call it Southern Canada. But that's where I'm from right now, and it is morning time. It is 8 a.m. I would love for you all just to hop in the chat for me right now and let me know where you're coming from. What country are you in right now?
I joined this meeting from Iraq, Basra.
Kindly write down in the chat box. Kindly write down in the chat box any question, any queries, anything being asked. Please write down in the chat box. Thank you very much, everyone.
Awesome, thank you, Syed. So I did hear Basra. I see Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, UAE. We got somebody in Illinois here in the States waking up early with me. Well, not so early, but in the morning time. Qatar. Wow, it's just so awesome to see such a diverse group of people coming together to talk about safety. And what really gets me excited about this is I know you guys are here because you want to. As far as I know, none of you all are being forced. This is not mandatory for you, right? You're here because you're passionate about safety. And what I'm going to share with you today really has its origin from my military experience, where I had the great opportunity to serve with the diverse team of soldiers, people from all different walks of life, representing different nations and races from literally across the world. And I want to share one story in particular with you that really changed my life forever. So on June 8th, 2005, I was operating out of a small forward operating base near the Pakistani border. Now, this was the type of place we were short on everything, food, supplies, ammunition, but there's plenty of enemy activity. And on this particular morning, we were getting resupplied by a Chinook helicopter, one of the helicopters that had a big double rotor blade like you see in the picture. Now, resupply procedures were a common part of what we did. And our platoon was divided into two sections. So anytime that a helicopter would come in, one of those sections would have to stand by in case there was any type of activity or an attack. And the other section was responsible for unloading the supplies from that helicopter. So on that morning, my section was the one that had to basically kind of stand by. But the other section had a sergeant, and he was leaving to go on R&R, to go on holiday. And so I was going to go ahead and backfill his position and just help that other team out. So as I heard the sound of a helicopter approaching, I hopped in a Humvee with my good friend Luke. And right before we drove out to the landing zone, my soldier, Emmanuel Hernandez, hopped in the back. Now, he was supposed to be back with the other guys who were supposed to be waiting. And so I turned around and I was going to yell at him to get out. But then I thought that, you know what? I value that kind of work ethic in my soldiers. He wants to volunteer to come lift some heavy boxes and just help the other team out. That's great. I know that our team will be fine without him. But then I noticed he didn't have his helmet on. And I literally opened my mouth, but then I realized I didn't have mine on either. It's obviously kind of hard for me to say something if I'm not doing the right thing. So I said nothing. The helicopter landed, that exact helicopter right there in that exact spot, and a group of 10 of us stepped over to the side of the helicopter so they could take a machine gun off that back ramp and we could start unloading it. Now, it was hot. The rotors on the helicopter were turning. We couldn't hear each other, but my platoon sergeant gave me a piece of paper. It had some serial numbers to some items that we were expecting. And he's basically telling me, hey, it's your responsibility to make sure that we get these specific items. So I grabbed that piece of paper from him and I turned my back to the group so I could back my buddy up in the Humvee, just get him a little bit closer, to the back of the helicopter. And the next thing I remember, it was just bam! Everything went dark. And I was laying on the ground, disoriented. I couldn't hear anything. And my first thought was one of the other soldiers was just joking around, came and hit me on the back of the head, soldiers being soldiers. But then I looked up and there were bodies and blood all over the ground. The helicopter powered down, my hearing came back, and I heard that very distinct whistle of an incoming rocket. So I quickly got up and I dove underneath the Humvee for cover as rockets started impacting all around. And as I was laying there, I realized it was a rocket that landed next to us that had knocked me down. And as that barrage of rockets finally ended, I crawled out from underneath the Humvee and I started making my way back to the soldiers that were still on the ground, really unsure of what I was going to find. And as I was doing that, another soldier yelled from behind me that I had been hit. Now, up until that point, I hadn't felt any pain, but I turned my head and I looked at the back of my uniform and it was shredded and blood was starting to pour out. And it was at that moment that the pain just all of a sudden hit me. The other soldiers quickly triaged those of us that were wounded, loaded us into whatever type of vehicle they could find, and brought us to this small clinic on our base that local Afghan doctor worked at, where he treated the locals. And as we're getting loaded in there, my wounds were very, very minor compared to everybody else. My buddy Luke bandaged me up, and I saw this other soldier, Sergeant Michael Kelly. He's laying on an elevated stretcher off the ground. And the Afghan doctor who worked in that clinic, who was a really short guy, he's standing on this red milk crate and he's performing CPR on Michael. And I did a quick lap around the clinic to see who else was hurt. And I saw my platoon sergeant, the guy who had just given me that piece of paper right before the explosion. The femoral artery in his leg was severed, along with other severe wounds. And by the time I came back around, it couldn't have been more than 30 or 45 seconds, but they had lowered Sergeant Michael Kelly to the ground and were zipping him up into a body bag. He was dead. And I found my way into a small room in the back of the clinic where I found my soldier, Emmanuel Hernandez. He was laying on a table, unconscious. His head was bandaged, but I could see his chest. I could see his chest rise and fall. So I knew that he's breathing. And I just grabbed him by the hand and I whispered, hey, everything's going to be okay. Medevac helicopters arrived, brought us to forward surgical teams spread throughout Afghanistan. And I was on a helicopter ride with my platoon sergeant, the one who had the severed femoral artery. By that point, he had lost consciousness, but thanks to the quick thinking of the soldiers on the ground for putting a tourniquet on his leg and the medical staff that treated him, he survived and he kept his leg. Now, the surgical team removed several pieces of shrapnel from my back, but they left a few souvenirs in there for me that were a little too deep to get out. But they stitched me up and they bandaged me up and they sent me back to the landing zone to get on another helicopter ride to go to Bagram Airfield for some more advanced medical care. And as I was waiting there, my commander approached to see how I was doing. And I said, I'm going to be just fine. How is Emmanuel? And to my relief, he said he was going to be okay. And I felt the weight of the world was just lifted off of my shoulders. And he turned to walk away and he got about 4 or 5 steps. And he turned back around. And with tears coming down his cheeks, he said, I'm sorry that I lied. Emmanuel did not make it. My knees got weak. As I hit the ground, my commander embraced me. Emmanuel died because shrapnel from the explosion hit him in the head. He died because I wasn't doing the right thing, because I didn't have the courage to speak up and to say something. And there's been so many days where I've thought how simple it would have been if I would have just said, hey guys, wait, let's go get our helmets. I mean, nothing would have been delayed. Just that morning at breakfast, Emmanuel was telling another soldier how he couldn't wait to get home and to start having kids. And if only I would have said something, right? His wife, Jessica, would still have her husband. His mother would still have her son. And he'd still have his life ahead of him. But guess what? We've done it like that 100 times before, and nothing has ever happened. And I know it's such a cliche. It's that 1 in a million chance, but I'm living proof, absolutely, that it can happen if you take those types of shortcuts or when people don't speak up. Now, I beat myself up for a long time after that incident. I tried to drink my problems away with alcohol. I tried to wash them away with pills. I was addicted to Vicodin and morphine, some very strong painkillers, for 5 years. It's a miracle that I survived that. And of course, none of those work, right? Those only serve as accelerants for the challenges that I was already facing. But thankfully, I've learned that I can take that story, I can inspire others, and I can influence the future. Now, I'm what I like to call an accidental leader, because people did not look at me when I was a kid, when I was growing up. People didn't look at me and say, man, that kid right there, he is going to go do some great things someday. So when I was born, my mother was 19 years old. She was single, unemployed, no father figure in sight. And the statistics showed in the United States, people in those situations, I was twice as likely to drop out of high school, more likely to end up in jail. I had a higher chance of suffering from abuse and neglect. People did not, again, look at me like, man, that kid, he's gonna be a great leader someday. And so when I was growing up, I saw drugs in the house. I was coming out of school one day and my mother was getting arrested, put in the back of a police car. My stepsister committed suicide in rehab and drug rehabilitation. I ran away from home and took my mother to court through the judicial process because I didn't want to live there. It was a pretty tough childhood, but it definitely could have been worse. And some of you all might even be able to relate to some of those challenges that I faced. And I barely graduated high school, and I stumbled my way into a small community college. It's small 2-year college in rural Minnesota. You know, I did not have the type of family that helped me fill out the applications or the financial forms for college. I had to do it all myself. And so with no real direction, I started skipping classes that first week. So as far as college was concerned, I was headed nowhere pretty fast. But then my life changed that Tuesday morning in September in 2001 when the September 11th attacks happened. I was in my 3rd week of college. And as I watched on TV, I felt helpless. I felt sorrow. I felt some anger. And so 2 days after the attacks, I dropped out of college and I joined the Army. Now, I like to joke, you see that man in the picture, that was the man that my wife married, because, you know, that was about 40 pounds ago, though. I'm a little softer on the edges these days, but I went on to serve 6 years and 10 months and 22 days as a paratrooper in the United States Army. And I ended up going to Iraq for 12 months. I went to Afghanistan for 12 months. And then I went back to Afghanistan again for 15 months on my last deployment. And it was at that point that the Army offered me the opportunity to sort of, you know, get away from the front line of the wars and the conflicts. And so they wanted me to go train new lieutenants in the state of Oklahoma in the United States. Now, nothing against lieutenants or the great state of Oklahoma. I had zero desire to do that. I was ready for a new challenge. So in December of 2008, I left the Army. And in January 2009, I was sitting in a college classroom with a bunch of 18 and 19-year-old kids. Now, I was 26 at the time, and I felt like the old man on campus, kind of the one that everybody looked at like, what's that old guy doing here? Obviously, in hindsight, 26 is still really young. Now, I was attending the university where at that time, the Minnesota Vikings, a National Football League team, American football, used to hold their training camp. I was majoring in sport management, and I was very fortunate to receive this very big award called the NFL Pat Tillman Military Award, the very first one ever. And so when September 11th happened, Pat Tillman was an active player in the National Football League, American football, making millions of dollars. And he gave that all up to join the United States Army. And unfortunately, he was killed in Afghanistan by friendly fire in April 2004. Well, fast forward, his family and the National Football League create this foundation, and I'm very honored to get this award. And so those 3 things, so I'm going to school where my favorite football team, American football, held training camp. I'm majoring in sport management, and I was awarded the Tillman Award. That led to my very first job outside of the Army. I was hired as a marketing intern at that annual training camp for the Minnesota Vikings American football. And I'll never forget the first day, because the person in charge of the interns, it was another intern. It was a 21-year-old kid, and he's holding a clipboard, and he's walking around letting everybody know what they're going to be doing for the day. And he gets to me, says, "Patrick, I want you to go work over there at Station 17. And I turn around to where he was pointing, and it was a bounce house, a big inflatable bounce house. And I said, the bounce house? He said, yeah. And I could feel the physiological reaction my body was having. I had a Bronze Star, which is a very high military award. I had a Purple Heart, which is an award you get for being wounded in combat. I had all those years leading soldiers on combat missions, all this leadership. And now I am relegated to watching kids jump in this bouncy house. I could feel like I wanted to punch him in the throat, right? Like, you want me to watch kids jump in a bouncy house? But I also had a vision of working in professional sports. And I knew if I would have let that manifest into behavior, there was no way that was going to come true. Now, I'm curious if you all can hop in the chat. This is just a yes or no question. How many of you all have been in a similar situation where something just, it pushes your buttons and you have to do everything you can to control your emotions? Just write yes or no. I would imagine Mohammed, Munira, everybody is saying yes, right? We've all been in that situation. Now, I'm going to ask you a different question quick here. It's another yes or no. How many of you have failed at fighting off that reaction and you've let your emotions get the best of you? And maybe you had a reaction that you're not proud of. It's happened to me as well many times, right? There is a great analogy that describes this, and it's called the elephant and the rider. So the elephant, this big, beautiful, majestic animal, that represents your reaction or that emotional part of your brain. And the rider, the little tiny person on top, that represents your response or the logical thinking part of your brain. Now, if that little person on top has no idea what they're doing, which way do you think that elephant will go? I mean, probably whichever way it wants to go, right? But just imagine if that little person on top knows what they're doing, if they have the skills, the training, the experience, they can keep that elephant on the exact same path. Okay, now we're going to do something a little bit fun. I'm going to give you all a test. And I'm pretty sure Syed doesn't know about this. He didn't help you prepare, but don't worry, it's all in fun. All I need you to do is to watch the screen and to follow my direction. So you're going to say your answer out loud, so you can stay on mute. But wherever you are, whether it's in the office, in a house, in a coffee shop, I want you to actually say your answer out loud. And then we'll go into the chat and we'll see what happened, okay? So I imagine everybody's nodding their head north and south. So here are your instructions, and I'm going to put them on the screen. I want you to state, so say the color of the word.
Red, yellow, white,
Red,
orange.
Okay, now hop in the chat. And did you get 100%? I would imagine many of you did, right? Okay, now I'm gonna give you the test again. All right, I just want to make sure that everybody's engaged, everybody's paying attention. Just you don't need to say the answers in the chat. Just say the answer to yourself, but we'll hop in the chat and talk about it. Okay, so same instructions. I just want you to say the color of the word. Ready, set, go.
green, white, red,
Orange, green,
blue, orange,
yellow, black, red.
Okay, hop in the chat. What happened? What happened?
At the orange, it was orange.
It was tricky.
It was tricky. So tell me in the chat, did you start reading the word? I would imagine everybody's reaction was to read the word, right? Why? Because that is what we're used to doing, right? And you needed to exercise something known as cognitive discipline, which is your ability to inhibit those instinctual, conditioned, and habitual reactions and help you use a more learned out response instead. So I'm going to give you one more try at this, okay? Same instructions, all right? Stay on mute, and I want you to state the color of the word.
Blue, yellow, black, green,
yellow,
Red,
orange.
yellow,
white,
Okay, so hopefully you did better on that time, right? You were exercising cognitive discipline, your ability to stop that reaction, to use a more thought out response instead. Now, one of the best pieces of advice that I ever received in my life, it came from a former colleague of mine. He used to fly F-16 fighter jets in the Air Force. And one day he asked me, he said, hey, what do you think one of the first things they teach us in fighter pilot training when an alarm goes off in the cockpit? And I said, I have no idea. You push a bunch of buttons, you hop on the radio and you call Mayday and maybe you eject. He said, no, the very first thing that they taught us to do was to wind the clock, because you can't break anything by winding the clock. And it's making your brain take that brief pause instead of that instant fear-driven reaction, and helps you trigger a more thought out response instead. And so just like many of us remember the concept of stop, drop, and roll if you're on fire, I have remembered wind the clock. It's my reminder to take a step back, to take a breath, and let my brain trigger a more thought out response instead. And now, thankfully, that first day that I was with the Minnesota Vikings, the American football team, I was able to wind the clock. And I actually went on to work full time in the National Football League for my hometown team. So this would be like, I know many of you are probably huge football fans, soccer, as we call it in the United States, but huge football fans. This would be like you maybe going to work for that favorite team that as a child that you cheered for. And for me, it was my dream job. I got to work directly with the players and the coaches. Anything that they needed off the field, I did. I booked their flights, their hotels, the catered meals, ticket requests. I passed out their fan mail, their pay stubs. It's not as glamorous as what some people might think. And it didn't take me long to realize that's not what I wanted to be doing with the rest of my life. And from there, I ended up working for a small leadership development firm that literally took me all over the world. I got to do some awesome leadership development training in China, Africa, all over Europe, all over the United States, with companies ranging in size from global Fortune 100 oil and gas companies to small family-owned businesses and everything in between. And in February of 2020, while COVID was still in its infancy, as far as what we knew at the time, I got let go from my job. And I cried. I was the sole income earner for our family. And my wife and I, at that time, we were 12 months into the adoption process. We were going to adopt a baby. And we had been trying for 12 months. And we found out, we ended up being matched with a mother who was going to give birth in March. And at the beginning of February, we found out that she was a fraud and she was scamming us. And so we lost out on $15,000, which is a lot of money, especially when you don't have a job. And so we had no idea what we were going to do. But what hurt worse, besides losing that money, was the emotional investment that we had. And an hour later, I wiped away my tears and I went to a website and I registered a new business and I got back to work. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend starting a new business at the beginning of a worldwide pandemic. But at the same time, too, I wasn't going to be the victim or throw myself a pity party, right? I wasn't unique. Every single one of us in the entire world was being impacted by this. I saw it as an opportunity for me to follow my dreams and go out there and to inspire others and to influence the future. And that's what I've been doing. And me being here with all of you is just one small part of that. And for those that might be wondering, after a lot of prayerful consideration, we did continue on the adoption journey, and we actually brought home our beautiful daughter, Haven, at the end of May in 2020. And she has just been an absolute bright spot in our lives during these challenging times. And in March of this last year, we brought home, my wife gave birth to another baby. Her name is Harper. So we have 4 girls, and all their names starts with the letter H, and I get them mixed up all the time. Every single one of us has a why we work safe, why we work hard. And these right here are my why. Now, when it comes to safety, you know, research shows 99 point whatever % of all safety incidents are completely preventable, but incidents still happen. I want you to hop in the chat, just humor me. Why do safety incidents happen? Give me the reasons. Give me the reasons why a safety incident, human error. Thank you, Abdul. What are some of the other reasons that safety incidents happen? Shortcuts? Asfan, yes, absolutely. Don't follow the rules. No management commitment, right? We all know the reasons. You guys are professionals. Pressure, overconfidence, fatigue, lack of resources, human error. Now, I'm going to ask you a yes or no question here. You all are safety professionals. How many of you have been guilty of one of those things? Say yes or no. I've taken a shortcut, human error, not wearing proper PPE. Come on, guys. Hey, I know everybody at one point in your career, we've taken that shortcut, right? It might have been early on in your career. Maybe you weren't wearing your helmet at a time. Maybe you had some fatigue. I know, I can almost guarantee everybody has taken at least one time in your life. But we've been lucky. But when it comes to our lives, that's not something I want to trust luck with. And so when it comes to safety, you know, I'm not a safety type professional that can tell you about working at heights or confined space entry. I don't know that. I look at safety from a leadership standpoint. And for me, I got into safety in the year 2017. So I was doing some work in the United States and in Africa and Europe with a company called Marathon Oil. And they had a really bad year safety-wise. People got hurt and people got killed. And so in January of 2018, the CEO of Marathon Oil gathered leaders from all over the field down to their corporate tower in Houston, Texas, and basically said, look, we need to put our heads together and figure this thing out, because what we're doing now is not working. And I helped facilitate this seminar. And I watched as the CEO of this Fortune 500 oil and gas company got up and started talking about safety. And this guy just, you know, he didn't say what's expected of him because he's the CEO. This guy got up there and told a very personal story about why safety matters to him. And he actually started crying. And I watched how people responded to that. And it made me think of the time, you know, on my last deployment to Afghanistan, I used to have to give mission briefings to my soldiers before every mission we went on, much like maybe you have a startup meeting or your JSA or JHA or your toolbox talk or your tower talk. You're telling your people important safety information. But the problem that I was facing was I was lulling my soldiers into complacency. Every day they're hearing the same message and they weren't engaged. They weren't paying attention anymore. So I knew I had to get creative and think outside the box. And so one thing I did was I'd start picking one of my soldiers to lead that briefing. I'd let them know the day before and I'd help them prepare. And then I'd stand right next to them to help them in case they needed it. And the other thing I did was I started to tell personal stories around safety. And so at Marathon Oil, we created this safety leadership workshop, really unlike any they ever had. It brought relevant discussions, practical tips, and out of your seat exercises around two main pillars. So servant leadership and forward-looking accountability. But the cornerstone of this workshop was something known as a safety stump speech. It's a brief yet powerful story on why safety matters to you. And it follows this easy 3-part template by communicating what your view is on safety, sharing your personal story, and wrapping up by sharing your commitment. Don't worry about taking a picture of this. I can send it to you afterwards. I'll email it to you so you have it. Now, people telling their stories in safety is not anything new. But what I found when I go into organizations is you get people up there telling their story, and they're talking for 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes, and they're kind of talking in circles. They haven't really got to the point of their message, and everybody has mentally checked out, and the message is lost. And so what this template does is it allows people to be brief and personal, because my view on safety is if we really want to move the needle, if we really want to be proactive, it's not going to be, hey, here's another piece of PPE, here's another government regulation. It's going to be getting people to take safety personally on a very consistent basis. And so we rolled out this workshop to the entire organization at Marathon Oil. And many of these workers who came into this workshop were the field level employees in oil and gas, which many of you know, and in the United States, they call themselves roughnecks, right? They will tell you they're not the most approachable people in the world. They come into the training and they sit down and they cross their arms and they don't want to be there, right? It's not their first safety training. They don't want to be there. And at the beginning, I get up and I shared my personal story around safety. And then I let everybody know at the end, each and every one of you is going to have to get up here and to share your own story as well. And you could imagine just how excited these people felt, right? Because who does not love being forced to speak in front of their peers? Not many people like that. But I kid you not, by the end of this workshop, many of these, and they're mostly men, were like arguing with their colleagues about who got to go next. And I watched some of these men, these very tough, unapproachable men, shed tears and tell their colleagues that they cared about them. That is the kind of stuff that's going to move the needle on safety. And some of those powerful stump speeches, I heard they were like 45 seconds to 1 minute long. We equipped every frontline worker with their own personal story that they could share with their colleagues throughout the organization. And so since 2017, Marathon Oil has seen an awesome reduction in their total recordable incident rate. As safety professionals, you know that the business case for being safe is there. It saves the company money. But more than anything, it is just the right thing to do. It is our personal and moral obligation to keep people safe. I mentioned one of the pillars that we focus on in this workshop is something known as servant leadership, being able to meet the needs of others. And I had a great example of what a servant leader looks like on my first deployment to Afghanistan. His name was John Post. So he was a young lieutenant, just a few years out of college. And at that time, I was 22 years old. I was already 12 months in Iraq, lots of experience, a new sergeant. But for John, what he lacked in experience, he made up for in his leadership behaviors. He was the type of person, he could sit a soldier down and basically tell them the 12 different ways that they were terrible at life. But they leave the conversation with a smile on their face. ready to charge up that proverbial hill, ready to, because they knew he was going to have their best interests in mind. He was going to give them every single resource they needed, and he's going to be right next to them every single step of the way. He was a servant leader. All right, now, what I want everybody to do here, and you don't have to turn your camera on, but I just want to take a quick little break, and I want you to do what I tell you to do. So put one finger in the air, just like that. Just put one finger. Now put two, and then do 3 fingers and just quietly twirl it around. It gets the blood flowing down your arm. Yep, just do what I tell you to do. Now go ahead and put it right there on your chin. Okay, hop in the chat. How many of you all put your fingers on your cheek? How many of you all did what I did? Hop in the chat, let me know. Amir, yes. Anthony, yes. You did, right? As humans, we have a tendency to mirror the behavior of others around us, for better or for worse. So, like when I was in Afghanistan, if I'm not wearing my helmet, how can I expect Emmanuel to do the same? But the good news is it works for the good stuff as well. And one of the things that this man, John Post, did was he empowered his soldiers to speak up. Now, let me ask you all, go in the chat. I would imagine you've heard or you have a concept at your work called stop the job or stop the work. Now, out at your work, who can stop the job? Who can stop the work if they don't know something or if they see an unsafe act? Everybody can, right? Everybody. And they know because you probably tell them every single day. Now, let me ask you, do you 100% believe that every single person out there would stop the job if they didn't know something or if they saw a potential hazard? Do you think every single person would? No. I'm telling you right now, the answer is no, because I've been out there in the field. And why not? Why do you believe that? Why won't everybody stop the job? What are some of the reasons? Tell me some of the reasons of why maybe somebody won't stop the job. They're not competent, right? They're afraid. Some people think they're going to get in trouble for stopping the job, right? For slowing things down. Now, I don't know about you, but I would rather have somebody stop the job because they didn't know something in order to save that one time where they saved my life. And my wife and my children would appreciate that too. Because those times where they don't know something, that's times for us as leaders to teach people. And even if people aren't getting in trouble for stopping the job, we still have this fear that if we don't know something or if we slow something down, we're going to get in trouble. So what do you think we can do to actually get people to feel empowered to stop the job? I mean, we're telling them, and we agree, not everyone's going to do it. Well, we need to get out there and you need to stop the job for no reason. Just to show them that, stop the job doesn't always mean, some people think it's like you're hitting this big red button and you're shutting everything down, the entire job, the entire work site, right? That's very rarely the case. Stopping the job could just be you're taking a step back, you're asking a question, and you're getting back into the work. It could be as simple as that. So we need to get out there and we need to do it to show that behavior. Another thing that this man taught me, John Post, was this concept of forward-looking accountability. Now, traditional notions of accountability are sort of backwards looking, right? Somebody does something wrong and we're going to point the finger at them and we're going to get them in trouble. Forward-looking accountability is taking ownership. And I learned a couple hard lessons during my time in the military. So I was promoted to the rank of sergeant between my deployment to Iraq and my first one to Afghanistan. So we were up in Germany training. And when we got back to Italy, where we were stationed, all my friends and I wanted to go out and celebrate. And we went out and we had a great time. And, you know, I drank some alcoholic beverages, as some soldiers tend to do in the United States. But we had a designated driver, which meant our driver did not drink. We were being safe. We had a plan. Coming back that night, we get pulled over by the Italian Carabinieri, the Italian police. But I'm not worried. Our driver has not had any alcohol to drink. It turns out our driver did not have an Italian license. And so we get detained by the Italian Carabinieri, who call the military police, who come and pick us up and bring us back to the Army base. And they wake up our commander and said, hey, you have some soldiers here that you need to come get. And I got in trouble. I got what's known in the United States military as an Article 15, which is non-judicial punishment. And so I was living in an apartment in the city of Vicenza, Italy, and I had to move back into the Army barracks. I was restricted to base for 45 days. I had 45 days of extra duty. They took, which meant I was working from 5 a.m. till midnight for 45 days straight. They took a half month's pay away for 2 months, and they normally take your rank. But my commander actually went and fought for me, and I was able to keep my newly promoted rank. But I had a hard time of understanding, why did I get punished so severely? I wasn't driving the car. But that's not accountability. And that's not leadership. And that prepared me for a situation where the stakes were higher. The summer of 2007, I was sitting up here at a small observation post in the Nuristan province of Afghanistan. There were 14 soldiers up there. I was in charge. I was the highest ranking. Now that's a position of authority, but that's not what made me a leader. What makes you a leader is your behaviors. We had no running water. We had no hot food, but we loved it up there. And we had a small little 5K generator that kept our batteries charged and the antenna charged. And every once in a while, a Chinook helicopter would fly in with a big 500-gallon fuel blivet, sling loaded underneath, hanging from a rope from the helicopter. And so we're literally on a mountain, but you can see behind me in this picture, we have a landing zone. It's flat, but it's not level. And so that helicopter would come in, it would hover overhead, it would gently set the fuel blivet down, and we'd put a rock in front of it so it didn't roll down the mountain. The helicopter would unhook the rope, fly away, and go home. We've done it many times. We've trained for it many times. This time I was on radio watch, and everybody took a turn watching the radio. Didn't matter what rank you were. And as I watched, as my soldiers were down at the landing zone, the helicopter comes in, it hovers overhead, it gently sets the fuel blivet down. My soldiers put a rock in front of it so it doesn't roll away. The helicopter unhooks the rope, flies away, and goes home. And just as my guys were about to hook it up to this little gator vehicle, a 6-wheeled vehicle, to bring it back up the rest of the mountain, my soldier pulls out the rock from under it. And that fuel blivet rolls down the mountain and it bursts open. Now we're going to need the helicopter to come back, fly through that dangerous valley where they're shooting machine guns and RPGs at you because we messed up. And if that would have been early on in my military career, I would have hopped on that radio so fast and said, well, Anthony pulled out the rock from under it. It's his fault. But that's not leadership and that's not accountability. I knew that I had to look inside. I didn't need to point the finger. I needed to point the thumb. There were things that I could have done differently in that situation to prevent it from happening. I could have made somebody take my radio shift. I had the authority to do that, so I could be down there supervising. I could have just held a little pre-job planning session with my soldiers, reminding everybody what their task was. And I didn't do that either. So I had to hop on the radio and let them know I lost the fuel. It's my fault. Now, I just want to share one quick story with you all before I go on the impact that we can have on others around us. So in February 2019, my wife and I and our kids are in the car, and we're making a right at a stoplight. And it goes into 2 lanes. and there's a car stopped in the right lane up ahead. So all the other cars are merging over. And I get closer, and there's 5 or 6 workers from an oil change, an automobile oil change company. They're pounding on the windows of this car. And I see that there's an elderly gentleman in the front seat slumped over. And what do? I drive right on by. But I didn't get very far because my wife turned to me and she said, hey, if that was you or my father in that car, I want somebody like you to stop because you know what you're doing. And she was right. I came back around. By then they had broken the back window. They had gotten the guy onto the ground. One guy was doing chest compression, CPR. The 5 other guys were just standing around doing nothing. So I did what our training tells us to do, right? I went up to his head tilt, chin lift, started clearing his airway. We were tag teaming CPR together. And I watched, every chest compression, this gentleman's food was coming up into his throat, blocking his airway. And so I'm having to, reach down into his throat and pulling it out. And we're turning him on his side and doing CPR. And I still hadn't heard the ambulance. I can't detect a pulse on this man. I thought he was dead. But out of nowhere, a guy shows up with an AED, an automated external defibrillator. He wasn't a doctor in a car. He wasn't a off-duty police officer. He was just a guy in a car. And he ran it over and we get it hooked up. Those of you that have been through the training, it talks to you, it tells you what to do. And it gives him a big shock. And we continue CPR. Finally, the ambulance arrives and they take over and I go home. And of course, all I'm thinking about is this guy. And later on that night, in a neighborhood Facebook page, people are talking about this. And somebody said, yeah, that guy's name is Carl. And he works up at this store called the Home Depot. And so Monday morning, I go into that store and I start asking about Carl. And they said, it's not looking too good for him. And Tuesday I go in, same thing. Wednesday, same thing. I go in Thursday and they said, Carl is sitting up in his hospital bed telling jokes. He had suffered major cardiac arrest. They put a couple stents in. He was going to be okay. Now, fast forward 4 months later, I'm in that store, Home Depot, shopping. And who do you think I run into? Carl. And I go up and I introduce myself and I said, Carl, the last time I saw you, you were laying in the middle of the road and I've got my fingers in your throat. And I tell you that story because I did not save his life. Carl was saved because of the man with the AED who stopped, who had the courage to do something. That man could have thought, oh, I bet the ambulance is right around the corner. I don't need to stop. Remember, I wasn't going to stop, right? My wife stopped me and said, hey, I want you to go back there. That man with the AED saved his life. I got sucked into what's known as the diffusion of responsibility. Studies and research show when we are in groups of people, we are less likely to speak up and help others. Why? Because we think somebody else will do it. Don't be like me in those situations. Now, I know that Syed's got an awesome survey for you all to take too, but I got this quick 3-question survey. Pull out your phone, scan the QR code. It takes 1 minute. The last question says, if you want to get a copy of the Safety Stump speech template, leave your name and email address, and I will email it to you. And I'll also email an article I wrote, a case study on safety. Can somebody hop in the chat and let me know that the QR code worked for them? I tested it. It worked for me. I just want to make sure that the QR code, you take your phone.
Patrick, it's working. It's working. Yeah, it's working right. Yeah, it's working.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll be quiet for 30 seconds. I'll let you take this survey.
Thank you very much, Patrick. It was indeed a comprehensive session for all of us. It was more practical rather than theoretical, which was the beauty of this session, because previously all of the sessions we had it was having information, but this session was definitely having some information with the picture which you have shown, the practical stuff. And I think you brought us to a practical zone where we all were thinking that how would be the situation if we were being to the same situations like you have shown few of the pictures. And I think it was a great event. Patrick, thank you very much for this session and agreeing with me and bringing some information to us across the globe, I would say, because you had mentioned many of the countries and the people joining us from across the globe at this moment. So I think it was a wonderful session, and I believe there is no questions for you in the chat box, which we can convey to you, apart from because you had run the show in a way which was the participation was from both sides. I mean, you kept us asking us and putting us into situation to speak up or to write down in the chat box. I think most of the questions being answered to them, whatever they were thinking of. If we get any questions through our emails or through our LinkedIn page, then definitely we will convey that to you. So once again, all of you, thank you very much. Please don't forget that you will be getting a survey from IOSH, and we would appreciate that. Please participate into that survey because it gives us the inputs, the insights that what you exactly needed from IOSH UAE branch, or what topics you're interested. All of these things we are here to support you or level best. Please mute your contender. Please mute at the moment. Okay. So once again, thank you very much. I believe there is nothing being left from our side. Once again,
Syed, I'd like to say one thing.
Yep, go ahead, please.
I just want to thank you for this opportunity to be able to come here today. As somebody who is just a one-person business, it means a lot to me, the opportunity that you provided. And I just want to thank you for that, and IOSH for the opportunity to come here. I appreciate it, and my family appreciates it. And so, and just so if anybody knows, hey, I would love to come over to your company and to share my story. I have a lot of fun, engaging activities that are much better than virtual. So I'm always open to coming over. I love what I do. I'm very passionate. And again, I just thank IOSH for this great opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, everyone. Don't forget that you will be receiving an email for the survey. Please spare your time and put the survey. Apart from this, please follow us on the LinkedIn page, IOSH UAE page, and you will have all of the information. We will be having more such great session. Thank you very much. Signing off, and on behalf of my committee, thank you, Haman, and have a great evening. Bye-bye. Take care.